Then we can try to reflect, contemplate. As long as our afflictive emotions, the delusions, are not eliminated, as long as we have those defilements, no matter what, we will always find something to be unhappy, something to be not satisfied, something to complain about. No matter what external conditions. On the other hand, if our mind is free from all those defilements, those negative emotions, regardless of whatever external conditions, we can always find peace, calmness, inner joy. With whomever you are, in whatever situations. Try to see whether that's the case, whether that's that being the case, it is so important to work with our own mind and to reduce and overcome all those disturbing negative emotions. In order to find our own true inner peace, joy, happiness, as well as in order to help benefit other sentient beings. And in order to reduce and eliminate those disturbing negative emotions, to reflect, contemplate, meditate, correctly, continuously. And to practice, we need to be reminded of the practices. Therefore, I'm going to listen. Not only listen, but whatever I find helpful, beneficial, that I will implement in my life, my everyday life. Take those teachings and practice with us wherever we go, not just in the Wamba. Okay, so then we do the prayer.
3 times in English. To the founder, the endowed, Sutra. Sutra. The endeavor to explain and destroy the system to the founder, the they perfected being knowledge, Sutra, God, if you teacher, God, to this is to the founder, the folks, the completely perfected and fully being. Supreme God, teacher, to the endeavor of respecting the spirit, the glory of God, the subdued spirit. Huge. Short mandala offering once in Tibetan. Sa Shiva.
Yeah.
Refuge in bodhicitta, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge in light. In order to benefit all sentient beings. Psalm. Song.
대선이 되는데 부담되는 잠깐 take this off. So last week we just started this Sutra, the rice seedling Sutra, and um, where we just kind of finish up to the prologue or the introduction. Again, I will just read that one. Thus, had I heard at one time that Bhagavan was residing on the Vulture Peak mountain in the Latvia, together with a large Sangha of 1,250 bhikshus and with a great many Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. At that time, the Venerable Shariputra went to the place frequented by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya, and after exchanging courtesies, upon meeting each other, they both sat down on the flat rock. So up to that, we kind of discuss this is last week. Yeah, you know, um, in those times, you can see Bodhisattva Maitreya or Shariputra, Arhat Shariputra, or even Buddha himself, a lot of time, when they were teachings, they sat on the flat rock, whatever they found there. They didn't have a high throne like here, you know. Uh, um, so here, so the next is kind of this is more kind of like the general kind of prologue that you find in most of the sutra descriptions at the very beginning, and then next is more unique of this particular sutra how Venerable Shariputra then said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya. As we mentioned, Maitreya is the Bodhisattva who has perfected the Maitreya or the loving kindness. Maitreya, today the Bhagavan, meaning the Buddha, the Bhagavan, the Buddha, gazing at the rice seedling, So where this teaching was given, there was a lot of rice fields, and so Buddha was gazing at the rice seedling and spoke this aphorism to the bhikshus. Bhikshus here, normally bhikshus means fully ordained, fully ordained ones are the bhikshus, female bhikshunis. But here, it also referred to those arhat who have overcome all the afflictive emotions. Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent arisings, sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. That's what Buddha spoke. Having said this, the Buddha said this, the Bhagavan fell silent. He didn't say more than that. So, according to the Nagarjuna commentaries, when Buddha fell into silence, then it says Buddha went into deep meditative concentrations. Again, I think we spoke last time also when we spoke about Heart Sutra, generally the Buddha is always in meditative concentration, meditative equipoise. At the same time, also he's able to function, benefit, and help sentient being together simultaneously, which the bodhisattvas cannot do. When they are in deep material equipoise, then they cannot function other activities of helping or benefiting sentient being. When they try to be in an act of helping, benefiting sentient being, that they cannot be in a deep material equipoise, whereas Buddha is always in both. But again, even Heart Sutra also here, Buddha showed that aspect. That's how from the origin, they felt like Buddha went in a deep meditation, even though he was in deep meditations already. Okay. Kamala Shilas explain why Buddha here when Bhagwan or the Buddha fell silent. His explanation why he fell silent is because to show a couple of things. He said among those audience, there might be some audience who might have some kind of pride that I understand what Buddha says even just by starting it. So to reduce those pride. So then Buddha didn't explain more. And also, and instead felt silent, after saying that, spoke that. And also to show the incredible qualities of the bodhisattvas. Because then by Buddha falling in the silent, it allowed the bodhisattva material to explain that. And so through by material Buddha, the material bodhisattva material have this opportunity to explain the meaning of what Buddha said, and thereby to be able to see his incredible qualities by the others, bhikshus and other audience. Which, those bhikshus or arhat, is unable to understand deeply as much as the Mahasattva, Bodhisattva material. And so that is Kamala Shila's kind of little explanation on that. Bhagavan falls silent. So then again Shariputra, saying, Maitreya, what is the meaning of the aphorisms spoken by the Sukata? Sukata, Bhagavan, Buddha, same, What is dependent arising? Because Buddha says, whoever sees the dependent arising sees the Dharma. And whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So the question is, then what is dependent arising? What is the meaning of dependent arising? What is the Dharma? What is the meaning of Dharma? What is the Buddha? What is the meaning of Buddha? So those are questions Shariputra asks to Maitreya. How does one see Dharma? By seeing dependent arising. How does one see the Buddha? By seeing the Dharma. So those are the questions, Buddha explained, and then after that, then Shariputra asking each of those, what those means. And yeah, I think those questions were raised long time ago, and still I think we have the same questions. We have the same questions. The Bodhisattva Mata material then reply to the Venerable Sharititi Putra, Venerable Shariputra, with regard to the what is dependent arising, is in the statement made by the Bhagwan, the Lord of the Dharma. So the Lord of the Dharma, referring to Buddha Shakyamuni, and Buddha is the Lord of the Dharma because the Buddha has actualized all the Dharma, all the knowledge that is there to be actualized, that is there to be understood, all the knowledge. And so, because that, therefore the omniscient one. He's the Lord of the Dharma because he's the omniscient one. Because he have understood all the Dharma. There's no more Dharma that he have not understood. No. And therefore, here is referred, therefore is a valid teachers. Therefore, you can trust the Buddha's speech. Because he's the Lord of the Dharma, who is omniscient, therefore, here the Metteyya Bodhisattva referring, therefore you can trust his statements, about those statements, trustworthy and valid teachers, So that is how Narjuna explains. Bhikshus, whoever see dependent arising, sees the Dharma. I can, repeating what Buddha has said before he go more details. So to make sure that the audience know what question was, and before he answered them. So again, he's repeating the same things what Buddha just said. Whoever sees dependent arising sees Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. Well, the praise dependent arising means that something arises because something else already exists. So dependent arising means there is already some cause and conditions that is already existed, and by depending on that cause and conditions, and a new result it come to exist, the effect, the result. Something exists because of that exists. This exists because of that. The rice exists because of rice seedling. First, the rice seedling, and then slowly rice. And if you go back, then the rice seed. So this, whatever condition, phenomena, or existence, or objects exist because there's preceding cause and condition that existed, that produced this result. Are we clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was something else. Something else is the cause and condition that already exists, and that cause and condition is that produced this existence. Something is born or produced because something else has already been born or produced. This arises because that has arisen. This is produced because that has been produced. If that has not been produced, this will not be able to produce. If there was no rice seedling, there wouldn't be the rice. If there is no rice seed, there wouldn't be the rice seedling. And because that is being produced, therefore, this is being produced by depending on that. So with that, it explains the general dependent arisings. How everything is dependent arising, especially condition phenomena, how everything is dependent arisings. So these explanations of Buddha's explanation dependent arisings, how everything is dependent arisings, is very unique and different from many other school of thoughts that existed earlier, before Buddha's and Buddha's time. You know, at that time there were many schools of thoughts. Some school of thoughts that believe not everything depends on license. Not everything depends on cause and conditions or other factors. Things can have random, and then they explain, they give an example on the school, the roundness of the P. They say there's no cause for being roundness. The there were a few examples. The sharpness of the tone, there's no particular cause and conditions. It's way it is just sharpness. And then another example they give is this colorful features of the peacock, very colorful. And again, it doesn't have a specific cause and conditions. It's just like that. That is one school of thought. Then many school of thought, they say, everything is created by God, and they give different names, Shivas, Brahmans, different names of different gods. But basically, everything is kind of created. The world and the being in the world are created by those most powerful, mighty God. And they are the creator of everything. So all these come into existence. The world itself, the being in the world, are created by them. And then some, also there is a concept of, permanent so-called Jito, the primary general. Again, it's not a god, but similar as that kind of energy, permanent, but which produce all of this. And Buddha's rejected all of them. And he says, all these conditions, phenomena, has its cause and conditions. There is nothing that does not depend on cause and conditions that can exist, the condition phenomena, impermanent phenomena. If anything that is impermanent condition phenomena, they all depend on its causes and condition. Nothing can come. Not only depend on cause and condition, it depends on similar cause and conditions. Therefore, the cause and condition that produce those has to be also impermanent, because the result is impermanent. Something permanent cannot produce impermanent result. The cause and effect has to be similar, and therefore, so that is the way. And of course, then all the phenomena, not only condition, all phenomena depending on arising, but depending on other condition, other factors. So that is the Buddha's. So if you kind of studies, different school of thought, religions, is the only Buddha who speak about dependent arising in such way. His Holiness the Lama mentioned, from his discussion with the scientists over 30 years when he had this Mind and Science conference. Even the scientist doesn't use dependent arising term before much. They are using more and more now. because there is more and more understanding, how everything's, before there was less understanding, something happened, but we don't know what the cause of that happening. Why did it happen? But I think now with more, then also the scientists are finding there is this change because there is this and that. And even with all these plants, everything, why we have certain shape, why we have certain color, why we have certain taste, why we have certain flavor. They have understood. That is why they are able to modify what you call G, start with the G, genetically modified. They are able to produce same size, same shape, same color, or different color or different shape, however they want to do, because they have found out cause condition that produce that particular all of that, and when they put all this together, then they're able to produce exactly same shape, color, size, flavor, or what or different they want to make. They are able to do because they have identified the cause and condition for that. And so when they put all this together, and then that's what the result produce. And I'm saying, if we talk about climate change, 50 years ago, maybe not even 50 years, if you said, that there's climate change because the forests are being cut in Amazon, nobody will believe that, what you're talking about, Or climate change because all the snow are gone into those mountains, and how those are affected by our human beings, emissions from the emission that we produce. Of course, there are still some people who doesn't kind of accept and believe that. But like 30, 40, or even 100 years, most people wouldn't. Even the scientists didn't know that. But now, with the time, they are able to connect and see the cause and conditions. And so anyway, dependent arising is very unique concept that Buddha taught. And as His Holiness said, even the scientists didn't use such terms very often before. Now they are using more and more. And that His Holiness said that he didn't, but some of the scientists told him in those meetings, So anyway, and that is the very uniqueness of the Buddha's teaching, dependent arisings. So that is general. That is with this, it explains the general, dependent arisings without differentiating external dependent arising, internal dependent arisings. Then it go more details, as you recall, then explaining external dependent arising, internal dependent arisings, to go more deeper. Okay. Also, we should understood maybe in this way. This exists because that exists. That explains the dependent arisings. This exists because of that other factors and conditions that make this exist. This is born or produced because that is being produced. That explains the external dependent arising. Okay. As I give the example, the fruit exists because there was flower. The flower exists because there was the stem and the branches. The stem and branch exist because there was, sprout. The sprout exists because there was the seed. If there is no seed, there is no sprout. If there is no sprout, there is no stem. If there is no stem, there is no branch, no flower, no leaf, no flower. If there is no flower, there is no fruit. We can understand that dependent arising, isn't it? This exists because this is produced because that is being produced. So then when it comes to external dependent arising is a little bit more easy for us to understand because it is something we can observe with our eyes. Internal dependent arising, we cannot necessarily see each of them with our eyes. We have to use our kind of reasoning, logics. It's just like in science, certain things they can reach out. Certain things they cannot reach out now, but they do calculations, how far it is, even though they have never reached there. They can calculate and see from here to there, how distant it is, how long it takes it, all that through such calculations, even though they have not been there and experienced them directly. Similarly, in Buddhism, we use those kind of reason and logic is similar like that. There are three knowledge, known as, office knowledge. Office knowledge are something that we can understand and experience directly, such as by seeing with our direct sense consciousness, by hearing with our ears sense consciousness, by directly smelling with our nose consciousness, directly experiencing by our tongue consciousness, directly feeling by our body consciousness, and so forth. Then there are certain objects that we cannot experience and understand directly with those sense consciousness. What is known as hidden objects, hidden knowledge. For those, then we have to use reasoning, logic, such as very subtle nature of impermanent, how everything changes moment by moment, millisecond by millisecond. We cannot see with our eyes, but we can use our mind to understand that with the reasoning logic. The change that we see in the month comes because there was change in the week. It's not like there was no change throughout the whole week and suddenly when it reached the 1 month, there was change. That change that we are able to see has been changing throughout the weeks. Those change in the weeks has been through days. The change in the days has been because there was change hour by hours. There is change in hour by hour because there is change in minute by minute. There is change in minute by minute because there is change in second by second. And there is change in second by second because there is change by millisecond, and I don't know how far you can go. In Tibetan, in Buddhist, there's like 60 counting in this space, they count 60, but I thought in science they can count even more than 60. So it becomes even more. So the change, and even we cannot observe with our direct sense consciousness, but we can use those reasoning. Those changes are happening because of that. Therefore, all these conditioned phenomena are nature of changing moment by moment. That is what we call hidden objects, because to understand, realize that object, you have to use inference, reasoning, logics. because you cannot experience, by ordinary beings, you cannot experience directly. Higher level of experience practitioners, Arya beings, they can experience directly with their mind, but not by the ordinary beings. And same with such as selflessness, the emptiness. The emptiness, selflessness is something that we ordinary beings cannot experience directly. We can only understand by using inference, reason, and logic why it's not inherently existing. If it's inherently existing, it will be this, but since it's not this, therefore it is empty of inherent existence. By using such reason and logics, we negate the inherent existence to understand non-inherent existence. Of course, again, Arya beings, they can understand directly. But we ordinary beings cannot experience directly. So we have to, or we can only understand through inference, reason, logic. That is why it's called hidden objects. And then most hidden objects are something, you have to go even beyond that, which are the very subtle of the subtlety of the law of cause and effect. Of course, there is general understanding of law of cause and effect, karma, through inference. That can be more like what you call hidden objects. But the subtle, if I'm experiencing something now, okay, good or bad, what are the exact cause and conditions? Where did I create it? When did I create it? Where, when, how, in exact manner? All these details, the subtle details, is not something that we cannot experience directly, not even with that kind of interference. So it needs a special interference, and that is most kind of so why did I talk about all this? I know it came from somewhere, dependent arising, and then we're talking about external and internal, or we were talking about internal dependent arising, maybe it was coming from there. Internal dependent arising is not something we can experience directly by ordinary beings. Then, using the inference, reason, and logic to understand that. I think maybe that was where. In order to explain them, I have explained those three knowledge of the objects. And so in coming to the internal dependent arising, external dependent arising is, the universe, our world, all the universe, all the plant, everything, all other objects. Internal dependent arising is the beings' experiences, sentient beings experiences, the world of the experience of the sentient beings, why do we experience suffering? What is the cause of the suffering that we experience? So that is the dependent arising, internal dependent arising. So that is where. So here, then, in relation to that, then here would I explain the 12 dependent link. And 12 dependent link is one of very important subject that we need to understand or have, when we have good understanding of that, then it helps us to understand why we are bent into the samsara by the delusion karma, how we are bent into the wheel of life of samsara continuously, you know. And also we understand how to how to get out of that when we understand that. You know, how can we get out of the samsara? How can we get out of being tied by the delusion and karma and free from the delusion and karma? By freeing from the delusion and karma, how we can free from the samsara and thereby achieve lasting peace or freedom or liberation, you know. So also through understanding that depending 12 dependent originations, you know, also it helps us to develop true renunciation mind, you know. True renunciation mind that turns our mind towards true liberation and turn away from being attached and distracted to the, you know, the samsaric pleasures, samsaric experience, and so forth. So it's a powerful practice meditations, you know, is a little bit more like, you know, we can say it is a more detailed explanations on the first Buddha after his enlightenment, the first teaching he gave, Four Noble Truth. The truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, the truth of the path. And it is the extension of the first two truth of suffering and truth of the origin. So it is more kind of expansion of that. We can understand it's more expansion of that as well. So coming to that, you know, so dependent arisings and internal dependent arising, then that is to say, ignorance of formations. So that is karmic formations, you know. Due to ignorance, we engage in the actions, unwholesome actions or contaminated actions. By engaging in such unwholesome or contaminated actions, then such karma is created, or karmic seed is created, or form, you know, karmic formations. The formation or karmic formation causes consciousness. Once you create the actions or karmic seed by engaging in certain actions, that karmic seed is led or imprinted or implanted or led within the consciousness. That is where then consciousness comes. The consciousness that carry the moment of consciousness that has been planted by the karmic seed, which will come more details later, okay? So that is the third one. Consciousness calls name and form. The consciousness that carry the karmic seed is being activated later at the time of death. And having activated that seed, then when your consciousness leaves this body, then you have take another body, and when you have that conception, at the time of conceptions, then that is where the name and form is produced. The form is the physical form, so at that time is embryo, you know, the eggs and the sperm. And the name here refer to the four other aggregates, the feeling, discriminations, compositional factors, and consciousness. So from Buddhist point of view, there's already feeling and the mind, even at the conceptions. Hmm? Yeah, if the sperm and the eggs are not what you call fault, but they are suitable, they are suitable, and then due to the karma, when someone consciously enter at that time, and then at that time that's already there. So that is the name and form. Name and form cause the six sense sources, the fifth one. Once you have that sperm and eggs, and where consciousness has entered that at the conception time, then over the times, days, weeks, then it started to take shape, oblong and different shape, and slowly, the sense faculty are developed. Okay, slowly, the sense faculties are developed. That is why six sense sources. The six sense sources cause contact. Once the sense faculties have been developed, okay, then through the six sense faculty, the consciousness is able to contact the objects and experience the objects. When there is no sense faculties, then the consciousness is there, the object might be there, but then consciousness cannot contact and experience the objects. Are we clear? That is why if there is some damage to your eyes sense faculty, then one cannot see it. Or if there is some damage to your ear sense faculties, then you cannot hear it. And so because there is a damage to the sense faculties. So the sense faculties is the one that help the consciousness to contact the objects through the sense faculties, come in contact with the objects, then is able to experience the objects. And therefore, that sixth sense faculty or sixth sense power cause the consciousness to come in contact with the objects. So it produces the contact. Not contact, contact, what else? Contact. Contact cause sensations. I don't know in English whether there's there's difference between sensation and feeling. No. Most translator will translate as a feeling. Here is translated sensation, but I don't know in English whether there's a difference or not. But anyway, so when you come into contact with the objects, and depending on how you experience the objects, good or bad, then different feeling arises. Your consciousness come into the contact with the objects, and then you experience the objects. And when we experience the objects, we experience sometimes in a good, nice way, sometimes we experience a bad way. Or sometimes in middle, neutral. Depending on how we experience good, bad, neutral, then three different feeling arises. If we experience in a good way, then nice feeling arises. Joyful, pleasant feeling arises. If we experience negatively, unpleasant way, then we experience more pain, suffering, unpleasant experiences. If we experience more neutral, then again, the feeling is more neutral. That is how the contact lead to the feelings. Are we clear? Yeah. Then sensations or the feeling cause craving. Craving is the eighth one. So once you have feeling, whatever feeling you might have by coming into contact with the object and having experienced differently, if you have a nice feeling, you have craving, wanting it more, not wanting to lose it. You don't want to lose that feeling. You want to experience that feeling more, wanting to have more that experience. That is craving. If you have bad feeling, unpleasant feeling, then you have craving, not wanting that, wanting to separate from that, craving for separation from that. So again, in that way, then again, that feeling produce the craving. And the nine is the grasping. And then with the cravings, when you have craving, and of course, if you are able to apply meditation, antidote, different practice meditation, you might be able to overcome the craving. But then when you are unable to do that, when we are unable to apply the antidote, the practice, meditation, the craving become more intense, more stronger. Intensify and become more grasping, stronger grasping, and that becomes grasping. When your craving has been very intensified and very strong, and yeah. So that is nine grasping. Craving cause here is a different translation. Craving causes appropriations. What is appropriations? I don't know the words. I'm not familiar with that words. I'm more familiar with the grasping, that translations. And do you know what is the English word, that appropriation?
Yeah.
To
Take it.
take it, okay. Okay. So anyway, the translation I'm more familiar with the grasping, that normally you might find that more in many other when you study the 12 dependent link. Appropriations or the grasping causes becoming. That's the 10th. Sometimes it is becoming, sometimes it is translated existence. The 10th. So then, through the craving and grasping, the 8 and the 9, through the craving and grasping, the karmic seed that you have created and left in the consciousness, you create a karmic formation at the second link out of first link, the ignorance, and then that karmic seed, immediately after you create it, immediately that karmic seed or the potential is planted in the consciousness, the third link. And that consciousness continue carrying that karmic potential of the seed. At the time of death, that karmic potential of seed is activated by the craving and grasping. So it's like the seed that has been carrying, but which it didn't get water before. At the time of death, through the craving and grasping, now it get the water. It get all the water and all the conducive conditions that need to produce the sprout from the seed the next very moment. And so when that karmic seed, which has been fully potentialized by having fully activated to produce the result, the rebirth, very next moment, that is what we call becoming. That mind, in your mind, that karmic seed that is fully potentialized, fully activated and fully potentialized. And that is called the existence or the becoming. Becoming causes the birth. And so, in terms of birth, when all the conditions are come together, the karmic seed to take a birth has been fully activated, fully potentialized. The next moment, the moment after you die, your consciousness lives, then the birth. The birth here doesn't necessarily means coming out of mother's womb. During the conception, the birth have started. The moment conception happens, from that moment, the birth have started. Even though in general, we talk birth after the child come out of mother's womb, but actually the birth had already started. The moment the consciousness enters the sperm and the egg, the conception time, that very moment the birth have started. So the birth is the 11th link. Okay? And the birth causes aging and death. And from the very next moment of the birth, the aging have started. Aging, progressive aging, and deterioration aging. Progressive aging had started. Aging had already started. Maybe we should only have progressive aging, isn't it? Maybe we should cancel the deteriorating aging. We can just have the. So basically, aging has started. Okay, aging has started. And then finally, the death comes. When it comes, we don't know, but it comes. Anyone who is born in samsara cannot escape the death. Any birth, any rebirth of birth that is a result of karma and delusion cannot escape the death. Of course, if someone highly reliant beings, who have a birth out of uncontaminated wisdom and compassion and so forth, then they don't have to experience death. They have the choice. But ordinary beings who are driven with karma and delusion, they don't have choice. They don't have the choice. We all have to face that death. So that is the aging and death. And then after that, aging and death. So when one experience one own death or the death of our loved ones, near ones, then sorrow, experience a lot of sorrow, grief, and then those sorrow and grief come in the form of expression, this, kind of speech limitation, and then sufferings, physically not feeling so well, affected by the grief, the loss, everything's, and then unhappiness, distress on mental level. So then we experience, distress, unhappiness, grief, all on this emotional level, and also it affects our physical level. And through that, we also experience, physical pain in different forms, suffering different forms, and disturbing the turmoils, and all other. Here, the disturbing turmoil means all other different emotions, That I think that the Buddha will, the material will explain a little bit more detail on each of the what does each of those mean later, but just to go through that. Thus, this entire great heap of suffering arises. Thus, this entire, great of heaps, means a lot, of sufferings arises, and we experience that. So that explains the evolutions of samsara. How samsara come into existence gradually, starting from the ignorance. Starting from the ignorance, and slowly samsaric birth, and with the samsaric birth, then sickness, aging, death, and all other suffering that come in between. All these sufferings. Why do we have to die? Why do we need to get sick? Why would we get sick? No matter how you try to keep healthy, I don't think there's any person in the world who have tried everything to keep healthy, but who have never got sick. Of course, there can be different levels or chronic illness, and people who doesn't have chronic illness, and even that they're different. But you wouldn't be able to find properly if you ask everyone who have not got sick. Everyone might be trying all different things to keep themselves healthy and not get sick. Still, everyone gets some kind of sickness, maybe not so bad, but on a certain level, even if it's a lighter level, sickness. Why we all have to die? Why we have to age? And all other suffering that will come is, because of such samsaric birth. This such samsaric birth come with delusion karma together, and because all this delusion karma and such birth, then all this problem comes, all this suffering arise, all these problems, sufferings, pain arises. So that is the explanations of the Buddhism, why we suffer. Why we suffer, not because someone is punishing us, whatever you call it, The God is not punishing you. The God is not testing you, or other form of that, but it is due to certain cause and conditions. Certain cause and conditions that have been created by ourselves. Due to all these cause and conditions, therefore that is this result. So therefore, these sufferings are not going to go by praying for those beings, whether it's God, whether it's the Buddha, whether it's whatever different name you might give, some kind of external powerful energy or agency or something. Is something, if you don't want those suffering, if you want to end those suffering, you have to get rid of the cause that lead to that. So it comes back to ourselves. We are responsible for our suffering and we are responsible for our happiness. The God, the Buddhas, others can contribute and help a little bit, but in the end, it all comes back to us. Just as others can help us, doctors, families, others can help us to a certain degree. And also some others can kind of contribute in certain problems. But in the end, it's up to us. At the end, it all comes back to us. Each of us are responsible for our own suffering, and each of us are responsible for our own happiness. It's in your hand. And that is the Buddha's important teachings, So yeah, I will today stop here. Anyone have any questions, comments, cautions? Anyone here? Anyone in the Zoom?
Not a question, but a
Comment,
an
yeah.
observation that it seems so obvious that I'm surprised it took Western science so long to catch up.
Well, a lot of time is not obvious until someone point out and you say, oh, it's so obvious. How did I never observe it? How did I didn't? But until someone point it wasn't so obvious. It happens a lot of time in our life. But also, I think that depends on our lives. And again, I think some of them obvious, but some of them not so obvious. I think that is where it is. Like the plants, how it grows, those depending, I think is obvious. But like how I think how different things affect our climate change and all of that, I think those are not so obvious, Still, even with the scientific explanation, still people find difficult to understand and accept that. Some people still find difficulty with that, and not only that, there are so many other things that are, I think, just like one of the school of thought says, the roundness of the piece, sharpness of the throne, all this, what is the exact cause of that is hard for us, but it's not obvious. But with the technology, they are able to pinpoint, go and see, and then they are able to identify different atoms or whatever, different atoms or whatever that makes that, and they're able to put those together, and that creates, triangular shape, square shapes, round shape, however you want those different shapes, you can create different shape and all of that. But I think it's not obvious. It's so I think there are a lot of things which are not so obvious. Some of them are obvious. Yes.
So when consciousness experiences an object and has a positive, negative, or neutral
Feeling.
feeling as a result of that. Is the source of which, the positive, negative, or is that karma, or
Uh,
in terms of which?
will come part of the function of the conduct is also distinguishing the objects differently. Whether you can say distinguishing or interpreting or projecting. So the mind project, this is nice. This is attractive, is a pleasant, is a good, is a useful, whatever. Depending on how your mind project the object, how you distinguish the object, that can affect your feelings. And your mind project, this is bad, this is whatever negative. And then when you project or distinguish or paint it as a negative, then your feeling towards that is more unpleasant.
But what makes your mind project,
Thank you.
what makes your mind project
Yes.
the pleasant or the unpleasant?
Thank you.
Then it is our state of mind, how our training of mind, not training our mind. If we train our mind, we learn to project. Like when we practice the lojong, someone who has, kind of good practice with lojongs, such as very good lojong, then even those unpleasant things, their mind is able to project and see something positive. And by able to see something as a pleasant and positive, they are able to, instead of aversion and anger, they are able to see it as something meaningful, useful in their practice. And they have a different reactions, different feelings, all that. And because they have that ability to do that, because they have trained, they have practiced to do that. Whereas when we don't have those practice and ability to do that, then again, depending on our imprint and different things.
So
Okay.
that would be karma,
Yes.
would it not? As to what you bring.
Before the teaching and before you examine and understand and whatnot, what characterizes that positive or negative or neutral reaction before you come to it with a different intelligence? Where does that come from? Where does the positive come from? Where does the negative come from? That's not karma, or is it karma?
Your imprint.
Isn't it imprint karma?
Sometimes we use slightly different imprint and karma. I think karma can be is a in Tibetan imprint is kind of sabin nuba. Even the arhat has imprint, but they don't have the karma, they are free from karma. So therefore all these kind of imprint or all these potential are not necessarily karma, contaminated.
But if you're not an arhat, they are the imprint. The lower karma.
I'm not so sure.
I mean,
Little conflict with when we say it's all karma. When we say everything is karma, every thought I have is because of karma. Every step I take is my karma. I'm taking every step because of my karma. Everything I'm thinking is because of my karma. Then I feel that I have no choice, no freedom to overcome it. And that is the difference that Buddha said, it's no predetermined. Otherwise, it almost becomes like predetermined. Predestination, all fixed. I have no choice. Every thought I have is driven by my karma. I can only trust my karma is good. And so then I have no control over that. But I don't think that is the case, from my understanding.
I'm left now with the imprint though, you know, and where that gets characterized.
Um,
Like an imprint has an outfit, it's positive or negative or neutral. And, but where does that characterization come from? Of the imprint, not necessarily.
What does that mean? Mhm.
How something manifests.
From previous actions or previous imprint. Yeah,
Okay.
for example, the ignorance is the result of previous ignorance. But I wouldn't say the ignorance is the karma. The previous moment is the karma of that ignorance. I don't see that terms. I can see the ignorance, previous moments or imprint of ignorance leading to the next moment of ignorance, for example. But I don't feel it's a right to use, even though there's imprint there, but that has been karma of that ignorance. It's the cause of that ignorance, it's the imprint of that ignorance. And that present ignorance comes from that potential, that imprint, that moment. But I wouldn't say that is the karma of this ignorance.
So it's like if you were a fisherman, you fished in a previous life, and then you're reborn. And somebody says, you're little, somebody says, we're gonna go fishing, and you go, I love that, right? Because you did it before, you have that imprint.
Maybe I didn't answer, I couldn't solve your problem, and I think it's better. You can think about night, and so that you don't have to sleep. All night you think about that. You can be awake all night today. Until next week. So, yeah, so we want to read the dedications.
We dedicate creative teaching to all beings. We dedicate for the health and long life of all our teachers. We dedicate for those experiencing obstacles, specifically Howard, Adrian, Wyatt, Gaza. And by the way, if I say somebody's name wrong, please shout out the right thing, because sometimes I don't know how to pronounce it. Hovion, Atlas Kirkendall, Martin Palomino, Jonathan Morales, Cynthia Peterson, Sophie Rojas. We dedicate for those experiencing illness: Patty, Bill, Jane, Infant Deer, Stella, Kathy, Rolf, Emma. Beings affected by the Boulder attack: Sarah, Margie Woodall, and those who are dying or who have died in the last 49 days: Pope Francis, John Kane, the Duck family, Tiffany, Bob Andrews, Weston Bosa Jr., Devin, Hargis, Zachary Adamson, beings who have died in Gaza, Raccoon, beings killed from the Indian Airways plane crash, Leroy Rodriguez, Sandro the dog, and Lou Mogenberg. Anyone else? Anything to add? Okay. Then we'll do our dedication prayers once in Tibetan. Gewadi. Salam. through. Two. Day. Sun. Show. My prayers for His Holiness Dalai Lama in English. The wish granting, wish fulfilling. And for the locating of the rebirth of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and you that is evidence in whilst God expecting study this one will get and from other page it's but nevertheless of the blessing yeah. We ought to portray make us smile.
Yeah, if you go to look the Sutra, maybe there might be a little more clear picture than that. Because it will come, in depending on both external and internal, there is explanation about cause and condition. And those are two things, cause and condition. And so there might be karmic cause, but it also depends on immediate cause, the immediate condition, how kind of immediate condition. So it's all about karma. There's karmic cause, karmic seed, potentials, but at the same time, it also depends on immediate different condition that will create, Yeah, so those two together, then it produce the experience, good or bad, neutral, it's not just the past karmic state. It is also contributions of immediate other cause, other condition that will create for the brightening of the karmic state. Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.